Morning routine of perfection. Olivia Matthews stepped into the gleaming lobby of Pierce Global Industries at exactly 7:15 in the morning. Her navy blazer and cream blouse were pressed to perfection, her dark hair pulled back in a simple bun that suggested efficiency rather than style. At 28 years old, she had mastered the art of blending into the background of corporate Manhattan. Nobody asked questions about the woman who kept Nathan Pierce's chaotic schedule running smoothly. That was exactly how she wanted it. The elevator carried her to the 45th floor in silence. Through the glass walls, the city spread out below like a living organism, already awake and hungry for the day ahead. Olivia barely glanced at the view anymore. She had trained herself to focus only on what mattered in this carefully constructed life she had built from the ashes of her former existence. The man who noticed nothing. Nathan Pierce arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, as always. His tall frame filled the doorway of the executive suite, his dark suit impeccable, his phone already pressed to his ear. He was 40 years old, recently single after a relationship that had crumbled under the weight of his work demands, and completely absorbed in building his technology and investment empire. His steel blue eyes scanned the documents Olivia had prepared on his desk without really seeing her standing there. "Good morning, Miss Matthews," he said, his voice distracted but not unkind. "The board meeting files are ready, Mr. Pierce. Your conference call with the London office has been moved to 11, and your mother called twice about the foundation gala next weekend," Olivia replied, her tone professional and measured. Nathan paused, finally looking up from his phone. Something in his expression shifted, became more present. "The gala. Right. I need you there this year. Not just for planning, but as my guest. I need someone who actually understands how these events work if something goes sideways." Olivia felt her carefully maintained composure crack slightly. Attending meant being visible, being photographed, potentially being recognized. "Of course, Mr. Pierce. I'll coordinate the details with your mother's team," she managed to say, her voice steady despite the anxiety beginning to coil in her stomach. Ghosts in the mirror. The following week passed in a blur of preparations. Olivia threw herself into the logistics of the Pierce Foundation Gala, losing herself in spreadsheets and vendor contracts. The event would raise money for arts education programs across the city. Every detail had to be perfect, from the flower arrangements to the entertainment schedule. She worked late into the evenings, sometimes looking up to find Nathan still at his desk across the office, both of them bound by their dedication to perfection. One evening, as Olivia finalized the seating chart, Nathan appeared beside her desk with 2 cups of coffee. "You don't have to work this late," he said, setting one cup near her elbow. "I know the gala matters to you." It was a small gesture, but it surprised her. In 3 years of working together, their relationship had been cordial but distant. She was his assistant. He was her employer. The boundaries were clear and comfortable. "I want everything to be perfect," she said simply. Nathan studied her for a moment, and Olivia had the unsettling feeling that he was actually seeing her for the first time. "You move differently than other people," he said suddenly. "Like you're always aware of exactly where your body is in space. Did you do gymnastics or something?" The question sent ice through her veins. "Just good posture," she deflected with a slight smile. "My mother was particular about that." He nodded, accepting the explanation, but something in his gaze suggested he had filed the observation away for later consideration. When he returned to his office, Olivia's hands were trembling slightly as she reached for her coffee. The Viper in Silk. 3 days before the gala, Victoria Ashford stopped by Nathan's office during a meeting. She was the head of marketing, ambitious and calculating, with perfectly highlighted hair and a wardrobe that cost more than Olivia made in 6 months. She had made her interest in Nathan abundantly clear over the past year, though he seemed oblivious to her advances. "Nathan, darling," Victoria said, sweeping past Olivia's desk without acknowledgement. "I wanted to discuss the gala seating. I assume you'll want me at your table?" Nathan glanced up from his computer. Actually, Miss Matthews will be accompanying me. She's been coordinating everything, so it makes sense for her to be there if any issues arise. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Victoria's smile remained fixed, but her eyes went cold as they finally landed on Olivia. How practical, she said, her tone suggesting it was anything but a compliment. I'm sure your little assistant will be quite comfortable among the donors and socialites. Miss Matthews is more than capable, Nathan said, a slight edge to his voice that Olivia had never heard before. It was almost protective. After Victoria left, the air in the office felt charged with unspoken tension. Olivia returned to her work, trying to ignore the knot forming in her stomach. She had encountered people like Victoria before, people who measured worth by visibility and status. In her previous life, she had been someone. Now she was deliberately no one, and that made her vulnerable to exactly this kind of dismissal. The dress that revealed nothing. On the morning of the gala, a package arrived at Olivia's small apartment in Brooklyn. Inside was a dress, midnight blue silk that seemed to capture light and shadow simultaneously. The note attached simply read, "You deserve to feel confident tonight. Nathan." She stood in front of her mirror that evening, barely recognizing the woman staring back. The dress fit perfectly, elegant without being flashy. Her hair was swept up in a classic style. Minimal jewelry. Subtle makeup. Even dressed for a gala, she was trying to disappear. But as she stepped into the hired car that would take her to the Waldorf Astoria, Olivia felt something stirring inside her that she had suppressed for 6 long years. Fear, yes, but also something else. A whisper of who she used to be, before the injury, before the grief, before she learned to make herself small and safe and invisible. The ballroom awaited, glittering and dangerous, full of people who had no idea that the quiet woman in blue had once commanded stages and breathed artistry into the air itself. Olivia Matthews was about to attend her first gala. But Olivia Beaumont, the dancer she had been, was stirring from a long sleep. And when Victoria Ashford decided to humiliate her in front of everyone, that sleeping part of her soul would finally, devastatingly, wake up at a ballroom of glittering masks. The Waldorf Astoria ballroom sparkled with 1,000 points of light. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen stars above tables draped in cream and gold. Women in designer gowns moved through the crowd like exotic birds, their jewelry catching the light with every gesture. Men in tailored tuxedos discussed deals and donations over champagne. Olivia walked beside Nathan through this glittering world, feeling like an imposter despite the beautiful dress that flowed around her legs like water. Nathan kept her close throughout the cocktail hour, introducing her to investors and board members with a courtesy that surprised her. He never called her his assistant, simply saying, "This is Olivia Matthews," and letting people draw their own conclusions. She found herself relaxing slightly, managing small conversations with the practiced ease that came from years of customer service in her hidden life. "You're good at this," Nathan said quietly during a break in the socializing. "Why do you always act like you want to disappear?" The question caught her off guard. Before she could answer, Eleanor Pierce approached them, her silver hair swept up elegantly, her emerald gown commanding attention. Nathan's mother had the bearing of someone born to organize charity events and move in social circles with effortless grace. "Everything is going beautifully, dear," Eleanor said to her son, then turned to Olivia with genuine warmth. "And you must be the miracle worker who pulled all of this together. Nathan speaks very highly of your abilities." Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you, Mrs. Pierce. I just wanted everything to be perfect for the foundation." When plans collapse. Dinner progressed through the first courses without incident. Olivia was seated beside Nathan at the main table, hyper-aware of Victoria Ashford 3 seats down, watching her with barely concealed hostility. The marketing executive had arrived in a stunning red dress that left little to imagination, clearly intending to outshine everyone in the room. Instead, she found herself relegated to a less prominent position while the quiet assistant sat beside the CEO. Midway through the main course, Eleanor Pierce's face suddenly went pale. She excused herself from the table and returned moments later with a tense expression. She leaned down to speak quietly to Nathan, but Olivia was close enough to hear the distress in her voice. "We have a serious problem. The ballet company scheduled for the showcase has cancelled. Their principal dancer was injured during warm-up, something with her knee. They're saying they cannot perform the full program without her." Nathan frowned, his business instincts immediately seeking solutions. "Can they do a shorter performance? Something simpler? They're offering a basic demonstration, but it will not have the impact we promised the donors." "People paid premium prices expecting something extraordinary," Eleanor said, frustration evident in her normally composed features. "We have nothing to fill that space in the program now. The trap springs." Victoria's voice cut through the conversation with false sweetness. She had been listening, of course, her sharp ears always tuned to opportunities. "What a terrible situation. Perhaps we could make it interactive somehow. Ask some of the guests to participate." She turned to Olivia with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "I'm sure some people here have hidden talents they could share. Maybe your date has some party tricks to entertain us. Can you juggle, Miss Matthews? Do card tricks perhaps?" The insult landed exactly as Victoria intended. Several people at nearby tables had turned to listen, sensing drama. Olivia felt the familiar instinct to shrink, to deflect, to make herself even smaller and less noticeable. Her hands gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles went white. Nathan's voice turned cold. "Miss Matthews is a guest here, Victoria, not entertainment." "Oh, I meant no offense," Victoria continued, her tone dripping with false apology. "I just thought perhaps she might have some experience with performance. You do carry yourself with such interesting posture. Almost theatrical. Did you perhaps do some amateur theater? Community dance classes?" The condescension was deliberate and cruel. Victoria was attempting to humiliate her, to expose Olivia as someone who did not belong in this world of wealth and sophistication. What Victoria could not possibly know was that she had just lit a match near gasoline that had been waiting 6 years to ignite. The decision that changed everything. Eleanor Pierce was studying Olivia now with sudden intensity. "You do move with remarkable grace, my dear. Have you had formal training in dance?" The question hung in the air like a blade suspended over Olivia's carefully constructed life. Around them, conversations had quieted as people sensed something interesting developing. Victoria wore an expression of smug anticipation, clearly expecting Olivia to stammer out some embarrassed admission of basic lessons as a child. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. 4. 5. Then something shifted inside Olivia. She was tired. Tired of hiding. Tired of making herself small. Tired of people like Victoria deciding her worth based on assumptions. 6 years of running from her past suddenly felt like 6 years too long. "I had some training," Olivia said quietly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "A long time ago." "Well then," Victoria said, leaning back in her chair with theatrical delight. "Perhaps you could help us out. Just demonstrate a few basic positions for the guests. I'm sure it would be charming in an amateur sort of way." Nathan stood abruptly, his face tight with anger. "That's enough, Victoria. You're being deliberately cruel." But Olivia was already rising from her seat. Her hands were steady as she looked at Victoria with an expression that made the marketing executive's smile falter slightly. "Actually," Olivia said, her voice carrying across the now silent table, "I think that's an excellent idea. The resurrection begins." She walked toward the small stage area where the ballet company would have performed. Behind her, she could hear Nathan calling her name, confusion and concern in his voice. Eleanor Pierce was saying something to the orchestra conductor, who looked bewildered. The entire ballroom had gone quiet, hundreds of wealthy donors turning to watch the unknown woman in the blue dress. Olivia reached down and removed her heels, setting them carefully to the side. The cool marble floor felt familiar beneath her bare feet, like coming home after a long journey. She could feel her body remembering things her mind had tried to forget. The way weight shifted through the ball of the foot. The engagement of muscles from ankle to hip. The alignment of spine and shoulders that turned the body into an instrument of expression. She signaled to Richard Chen, the orchestra conductor, who approached with obvious confusion. When she leaned in and named a specific piece, his eyes went wide with recognition. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly and returned to his musicians. The opening notes of Tchaikovsky's violin concerto filled the ballroom, and Olivia closed her eyes. Just for a moment. Just long enough to let the music wash over her like rain after a drought. Then she began to move. When art speaks truth. It was not a demonstration. It was not a few basic positions for amateur entertainment. It was a resurrection of everything Olivia had been before the injury that shattered her ankle and her dreams. Her body remembered everything with perfect clarity. Every technique drilled into her muscles through 15,000 hours of training. Every correction from teachers who had seen her potential. Every performance that had left audiences breathless. She moved through combinations with flawless precision, but technique was only the foundation. What poured out of her was emotion that had been locked away for 6 years. Loss and grief and stubborn survival. Beauty that refused to die. Hope that had hidden itself but never truly disappeared. Her extensions were lines of poetry written in the air. Her turns carved space into meaning. Every gesture carried the weight of everything she had sacrificed and everything she had become. The ballroom had become a stage, and Olivia was no longer an invisible assistant trying to disappear. She was fully, completely, devastatingly present. She executed a series of fouettes that left the audience gasping, each rotation perfect, her supporting leg like steel, her arms creating frames that drew the eye exactly where she wanted it. Then she transitioned into an adagio that seemed to suspend time itself, her body moving with a quality that transcended mere technique and entered the realm of artistry. She could feel tears on her cheeks but did not stop. This was not just dance. This was 6 years of silence finally finding voice. This was Olivia Beaumont, the dancer who had been destined for greatness before fate intervened, announcing to the world that she had never truly died. The world shifts. When the music ended and she landed in a final reverence, the silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then the ballroom erupted. People rose to their feet as one, applause thundering through the space like storm waves. Olivia opened her eyes, her chest heaving with exertion and emotion, and found Nathan staring at her from the table with an expression of complete wonder. Eleanor Pierce reached her first, taking both of her hands with tears streaming down her own face. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Who are you really?" Before Olivia could answer, other people were surrounding her. A woman she did not recognize was crying openly. A man in an expensive tuxedo was saying something about the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The crowd pressed closer, everyone wanting to touch her, to speak to her, to be near whatever magic she had just channeled. Then Nathan was there, using his height and presence to create space around her. He removed his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, a gesture both protective and intimate. When she looked up at him, his steel blue eyes held something she had never seen before. Recognition. Wonder. The beginning of understanding. "Olivia Beaumont," he said quietly, and hearing her real name spoken aloud after 6 years of hiding made her knees weak. "I saw you dance once. 4 years ago. Swan Lake at Lincoln Center. You were magnificent." Across the room, Victoria Ashford stood frozen, her face white with shock and humiliation. Her cruel plan had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. She had wanted to expose Olivia as a pretender and instead had revealed her as something extraordinary. Olivia met Nathan's gaze and saw everything changing in real time. The careful distance between them was collapsing. The professional boundaries were crumbling. And standing there in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by applause that would not stop, wearing Nathan's jacket over her blue dress, Olivia realized she was no longer invisible. For better or worse, she had been seen. Truly, completely seen. And there was no going back. The morning after truth, Olivia arrived at Pierce Global Industries before dawn on Monday morning, her heart pounding with each step through the empty lobby. The weekend had been a whirlwind of chaos she could barely process. Videos of her performance had spread across social media like wildfire, shared thousands of times with captions like "Mystery Woman Stuns Gala" and "Former ballet star emerges after years in hiding." Her phone had filled with messages from people she had not spoken to in years, former colleagues from the ballet world who had thought she disappeared forever. The carefully constructed walls of her anonymous life had crumbled in a single evening. Now she had to face the consequences, starting with the man who employed her. Nathan's office door was already open when she reached the 45th floor, light spilling into the dim hallway. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, his silhouette dark against the rising sun. He was wearing weekend clothes instead of his usual suit, jeans, and a casual shirt, as though he had been there all night. That he turned when her footsteps echoed across the marble floor. His expression was unreadable, those steel blue eyes studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Mr. Pierce," Olivia began, her rehearsed speech catching in her throat. "I apologize if my actions at the gala caused any complications for you or the foundation. If you feel my continued employment is inappropriate given what happened, I understand completely." Nathan crossed the space between them slowly, stopping close enough that she could see the fatigue in his face, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. "Sit down, Olivia," he said quietly, gesturing to the leather chairs by his desk. "Please." Stories written in scars. She sat, her hands folded carefully in her lap, every muscle tense with anxiety. Nathan took the chair beside her rather than sitting behind his imposing desk. The gesture felt significant, as though he was choosing to meet her as an equal rather than as an employer addressing an employee. "I spent the entire weekend reading about you," he said, his voice gentle but direct. Olivia Beaumont. Principal dancer with American Ballet Theatre at 22 years old. The youngest in company history. Critics called you a once-in-a-generation talent. You were scheduled to debut as Odette in a major production of Swan Lake when you vanished without explanation. No interviews, no farewell performance, just gone. What happened? The question pierced through all of Olivia's defenses. She had spent 6 years avoiding this conversation, hiding from these memories. Now, sitting in the quiet office as dawn light painted the walls gold, she found herself wanting to tell the truth. Needing to tell it. "I was injured during a rehearsal," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A partnering sequence went wrong during a difficult lift. My partner lost his grip and I fell awkwardly. The impact shattered my ankle in 3 places. They rushed me into surgery immediately, then 2 more surgeries after that to try to repair the damage." She paused, the memories flooding back with painful clarity. The hospital room. The doctor's sympathetic face as he explained her options. The moment she understood that everything she had worked for since childhood was gone. The surgeons did their best, but the damage was too extensive. "They told me I would walk normally again, maybe even dance recreationally, but never at a professional level. Never with the strength and precision required for a principal dancer. My career was over at 23 years old. When identity shatters." Nathan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, giving her his complete attention. "So you walked away from everything," he said softly. "Ballet was not just what I did. It was who I was," Olivia continued, surprised by how much she needed to say these words aloud. "From the time I was 6 years old, my entire life revolved around dance. Every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of joy or pain was connected to becoming the best dancer I could be. When that was taken away, I did not know who I was supposed to be anymore. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. She met his eyes, finding unexpected understanding there. I could not bear to stay in that world as something less than what I had been. Everyone would have looked at me with pity. Former colleagues would have offered me teaching positions or administrative roles out of sympathy. I would have had to watch other dancers perform the roles I should have danced, live in the shadow of what I had lost. So I left. Changed my name slightly, moved to a different city, built a completely new life where nobody knew Olivia Beaumont had ever existed. You hid yourself, Nathan said, and there was no judgment in his voice, only sadness. You made yourself invisible. It felt safer that way, Olivia admitted. I could not fail at being a great dancer if I was not trying to dance at all. I could not disappoint anyone if nobody had expectations of me. Being your assistant, being efficient and competent at something completely ordinary, it gave me purpose without risking my heart again. The risk of being seen. Nathan stood and walked to his desk, picking up a tablet and returning to sit beside her again. There's something you need to see, he said, his voice careful. He pulled up a video and handed her the device. It was footage from the gala, shot by someone in the audience. Olivia watched herself dance, seeing what everyone else had seen. What shocked her was not the technical precision, though that was there. It was the emotion radiating from every movement. The raw vulnerability. The beauty that came not from perfection but from someone pouring their entire soul into motion. She looked like someone who was dancing because she had to, because keeping it locked inside would have destroyed her. That person in the video, Nathan said quietly. That's who you really are. Not the invisible assistant who tries to disappear. That's Olivia, the woman who feels things so deeply she can make a room full of strangers cry just by moving through space. Tears were streaming down Olivia's face now. I'm terrified, she whispered. I spent 6 years hiding because being seen means being vulnerable. It means people can hurt you, disappoint you, take things away from you. At the gala, I felt alive again for the first time in years, but now everyone knows the truth. I cannot go back to being invisible, and I do not know how to be anything else. Nathan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His touch was warm, solid, grounding. Then maybe it's time to learn, he said. You don't have to be the dancer you were before. You don't have to be the invisible assistant either. You get to choose who Olivia is now. When walls come down. Something shifted in the space between them. Olivia realized that Nathan was not just talking about her. His next words confirmed it. I built an empire by never letting anyone too close, he said, his voice rough with honesty. After my relationship ended, I told myself I was better off alone, focused on work, not risking disappointment. I hired you because you were competent and undemanding. I liked that you never asked for more than the professional relationship we agreed on. He paused, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture so gentle it made her breath catch. But Saturday night, watching you dance, I realized I'd been lying to myself. I was not protecting myself from disappointment. I was protecting myself from feeling anything at all. You showed more courage in those 5 minutes on stage than I have shown in years. You let yourself be completely vulnerable in front of hundreds of people, and it was the most beautiful thing I have ever witnessed. Nathan, Olivia breathed, his name feeling different on her lips now, intimate rather than formal. I don't want you to quit, he said, meeting her eyes with an intensity that made her heart race. But I also cannot pretend anymore that you are just my assistant. I cannot pretend I do not see you, Olivia. All of you. The dancer, the survivor, the woman who is terrified and brave and extraordinary. I see you, and I cannot look away. The dance of new beginnings. Olivia felt something breaking open inside her chest, something that had been frozen for 6 long years. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to let someone see me and trust they will not leave when they realize I am broken in ways that cannot be fixed. You're not broken, Nathan said firmly. You're healing. There's a difference. He stood, pulling her gently to her feet with him. I have a proposition for you. Not as your employer, as someone who cares about you. Take a leave of absence. 3 months. Use the time to figure out who you want to be now. Maybe you want to return to dance in some capacity, teaching or choreography. Maybe you want to do something completely different. Maybe you just need time to breathe and heal without hiding. And what about us? Olivia asked, the question hanging in the air between them. Nathan smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. I would very much like to take you to dinner. Somewhere without donors or galas or expectations. Just two people getting to know each other without professional boundaries in the way. If you are willing to risk being seen by someone who already thinks you are remarkable. Olivia laughed, the sound breaking through her tears. It felt like sunlight after storm. I think I would like that, she said. Then, more firmly, I know I would like that. He was still holding her hand, and now he raised it slowly to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. Good, he said simply. 6 months later. The small dance studio in Brooklyn was filled with afternoon light. Olivia stood at the bar, working through exercises with a group of teenage girls from the arts program funded by the Pierce Foundation. She taught 3 classes a week now, sharing her knowledge with young dancers who dreamed of professional careers. The work filled her with purpose in ways she had not expected, watching these students discover their own artistry. Her ankle would never be strong enough for principal roles, but she could demonstrate, could guide, could pass on everything she had learned. Some days it still hurt, both physically and emotionally. But the pain was different now. It was the pain of healing rather than the pain of hiding. The studio door opened and Nathan stepped inside, leaning against the wall to watch the end of class. He came often now, fascinated by this part of her world he was still discovering. When the students left, chattering excitedly about their upcoming recital, he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. You're beautiful when you teach, he said, kissing her forehead. You light up in a completely different way. Olivia leaned into his embrace, breathing in his familiar scent. They had spent the past 6 months learning each other, building something real and solid without the complications of employer and employee. He had supported her decision to leave Pierce Global, understanding she needed space to rebuild her identity. He had held her through panic attacks when the fear of being visible became overwhelming. He had celebrated with her when she gave her first class and realized she could share her gift in new ways. Eleanor called, Nathan said, amusement in his voice. She wants to know if you will choreograph something for next year's gala. She said, and I quote, that brilliant young woman who made everyone cry needs to create something else beautiful for us. Olivia pulled back to look at him, considering the idea. A year ago, the thought would have terrified her. Now, she felt excitement stirring. I think I might want to do that, she said slowly. I think I have something to say. The gift of being known. That evening, they walked through Central Park as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Nathan held her hand, his fingers laced through hers, no longer worried about maintaining professional distance. They stopped by the lake, watching ducks glide across the darkening water. Do you ever regret it? Nathan asked quietly. The life you had before the injury? The career you could have had? Olivia thought about the question seriously, as she always did with Nathan. He never asked shallow things, never filled silence with meaningless words. I regret the pain, she said finally. I regret losing something I loved so much. But I don't regret where I ended up. That injury forced me to discover I was more than just a dancer. It led me to teaching, which I love in different ways. It led me to you. She turned to face him, placing her hand over his heart. The old Olivia was brilliant but fragile. She defined her worth entirely by her ability to dance perfectly. This version of me, the one who survived loss and learned to rebuild, she is stronger. She knows her value is not conditional on perfection. And she knows how to let people love her. Nathan pulled her close, his arms wrapped around her as the last light faded from the sky. I love you, he said, the words simple but weighted with everything they had built together. The dancer and the teacher and the woman who hides terrible jokes in my schedule notes. All of you. I love you too, Olivia whispered against his chest. Thank you for seeing me when I was trying so hard to be invisible. They stood there as night fell over the city, two people who had both been hiding in different ways, both learning that being truly seen by someone who loved you was not a weakness but the greatest strength of all. Olivia had spent 6 years running from her past, terrified of vulnerability. Now, wrapped in Nathan's arms, she understood that the real courage was not in hiding from pain but in choosing to live fully despite it. The dance had ended that night at the gala, but the music was still playing. And this time, Olivia was not dancing alone. The end.